All right, welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Peak podcast. We're with a special guest today. Oh, let me say first, of course, I have my co-host here, David Pare.
Yes,
Thank you for being
sir.
here, sir.
You're welcome.
And then, of course, we have a very special guest, which is Chef Bay or Bailey Ruskus. Welcome, Bailey.
Hi, what's up? So good to be here.
Yeah. So I'll read your quick. I actually appreciate your bio. It's like 2.5 lines. Simple, but powerful. Bailey Ruskus, also known as Chef Bay, is a best-selling cookbook author, professional plant-based chef, and advocate for those with chronic health ailments, animal welfare, and the environment. Like, cool. You know what? Like, when I first read that, I was like, it actually says so much, even though it's like 20 words. It's great. But again, welcome to the podcast. Really excited to dive into a lot of different directions I think that we can go with this. Of course, there's the obvious, like, hey, her name is Chef Bay. She's a chef. She does the chef thing. We'll jump into that. But there's also the entire journey, the entrepreneurial journey, the emotional journey, all these different things that I'm really excited to dive into. And yeah, so I think we could just start with that. You mentioned before we jumped into the podcast, hey, I just finished a book. That's a huge achievement. I'd love to hear about that journey. Both what people have seen and then what people haven't seen, because there's a lot that happens behind the scenes.
Yeah, it's honestly most behind the scenes. What people see is like, yay, I got a book deal. Look at all these pretty pictures. Like, yay, it's going to be launched soon. And what's really happening is like blood, sweat, and tears trying to get it on the deadline, you know? So we got the book deal. And I say we because my husband and I work together, and this business is nothing without him. He literally like holds the ship together, you know, as I'm like trying to sail it. And so, yeah, we got this amazing deal, and we got it in the middle of the pandemic. So we got it right before we were supposed to get married. Wow. And the publisher was like, surprise, you only have 3 months to write it. And it was like,
oh, wait, get out. You guys don't get to like negotiate that or something? Like there's no discussion. It's just,
I mean, I could have negotiated it, but I'm like such a go-getter, and I like really thrive under extreme pressure, which I need to work on, honestly, as like an entrepreneur. I need to like work on
relatable.
My motivation. But I was just like, you know what? Like my business had gone through so much. Like there was a time when the lockdown first hit in San Diego. There was a time that I really didn't know like how we were going to pay our rent. Like I was just super stressed. So all of a sudden we got all this abundance, and I got this book deal, and I have been dreaming of writing a cookbook forever. Like I've always wanted to be this type of chef. And so yeah, I don't know. She was like 3 months. I was like, let's do it. Like challenge accepted. And so yeah, we basically had 3 months to write the book. It was wild. They were doing construction on our house the whole time. My brother was like in a bad spot, so he ended up living with us the whole time we were doing it. We were newly married. We live in an apartment. It was the middle of summer in San Diego, and we don't have AC. So it was like, we were sweating like the whole time. But yeah, my book was due on Halloween 2020. Was it 20? Yeah, 2020. I don't even know what year it is anymore. But it was due Halloween 2020, and I like submitted it on October 31st at like 11:57.
Wow.
It was like to the wire.
Classic.
But then, you know, what you don't realize is like, you think that manuscript, especially your first book, you think like, oh my God, this is my first manuscript. Like everything has to be perfect, but you don't realize that the entire thing is just going to get ripped apart by the publisher. Oh yeah. They really rip it apart. In the best way possible. They're trying to make money off the book, you know? So basically it goes through like 9 different rounds of editing. And then they edit.
So that's like after the due date, like you're like, okay, get us the manuscript by this date. And then they just go at it.
Exactly.
9 times.
Exactly. And the thing is, you know, people in my life are like, just ask for an extension. Cause I was stressed. Like no one saw me for like a year. Cause I was like, and we were also working my business full time. Like that was like, we were spending money on this, you know, I was like, we still got to pay our bills and make rent and like do all these things. So it was like, we were trying to juggle a lot, and like in our personal lives as well. And, but yeah, the thing is if you push back the book launch day, or if you push back like your submission day, then you have an entire team at a publishing company that is waiting for you, and they're just going to move on to the next book, so that you could push back your day by like 6 months by just having your manuscript a week late. So I just wasn't really willing to risk that. And I just knew that a lot was on the line, and that I was going to do my best to make this book everything that I could. So I did it. I did it within 3 minutes, and I'm still so proud of myself considering all that was happening in our lives. Yeah, I mean, 3 days before I launched, I submitted the manuscript. Like, one of my best friends who I lived with before I lived with my husband actually overdosed and died from alcohol poisoning.
Wow.
So it was like I had a lot going on, and I was just like, if anything goes fucking right this year, it's going to be this book, this manuscript. So yeah, and then they go through editing it. It's a whole process. Your entire ego gets ripped out of your body and like thrown out the window, because it's like, you have to stick up for what you think too. Because a lot of times they'll be like, no, this isn't going to work. And I'm like, no, this is going to work. This is what I really believe in. So yeah, and then you have like this little period called the dead zone, where it's in between editing and launching and before your book goes on pre-sale, where the publisher is like, you know what, you have this time to like go on a vacation or do something, because like this book's about to rock your world. And I was like, oh, I'm just going to use this time to work and like, make money, because I'm just such a overachiever or whatever.
It's like, oh, an opportunity to do nothing. I'm definitely going to do something.
I know, it's such a struggle. And then, yeah, I guess we worked. I swear to God, my husband and I were like, we just went on our honeymoon like 2 weeks ago, and we were like, oh my God, we haven't stopped moving in so long. So yeah. But yeah, after that you publish it and it goes on pre-sale. And the second it goes on pre-sale, it's go time. So, for a first time author, publishers don't really give you any money. Like you get a book advance, right, to write the book, but you don't get money for like a book tour or like a book lunch party or like
it's all promo, and it's
all grass, it's all our dollar. Yeah. So I was basically like, I'm going to spend whatever money that we have to get this into the, I did 35 press boxes that I sent all over the world. That was like not the cheapest thing I've ever done.
Wow.
We had a huge book launch party that sold out. It was one of them, other than my wedding, it was like one of the most amazing days of my entire life. Like, San Diego showed up for us, and we had like this super long line for people to sign books. We had my friend Avante from Rollin' Roots food truck. He like had food there. Nova Kombucha sponsored and just gave us a bunch of kombucha. Like, it was just, I felt so supported by the community, and I was like, okay, like this is why we're doing it. And then, I basically from then on, just like interview after interview after interview. And then before you know it, I went on TikTok. I posted a silly mac and cheese video, and it went viral. And
freaking TikTok.
I know. It's literally like, and I was someone that's like, I'm not going to go on TikTok. And now I'm like a diehard TikTok person. I'm like, this app is amazing. Like, anyone can grow on this app, And yeah, I went viral overnight, and overnight the book became a bestseller on Amazon in 4 different categories, a week after it came out. So it was wild. So yeah, we book toured. We went to San Francisco, Denver. We just got back from Chicago, and now I'm finally sitting here with you guys, and I'm like, oh my God, that was a wild trip.
Wow. Damn. Bailey, yeah. First I want to celebrate you, because that is a lot to pack into 2 years. To go from writing the book and running your business, and then having to go through all those edits and having your ego ripped out and having to be okay with that, and learning to own your truth in that, and then getting married while trying to operate a business and manage to put your honeymoon in. Like, I feel like I need to take a breath just hearing
on your behalf.
On your behalf.
I know, it was wild. Yeah, but thanks. I appreciate the celebration. It was when life, and we were talking about before we got on, like when you have these lifelong dreams, these big, hairy, audacious goals, like for me, like being a best-selling author and having a cookbook that people actually like is such a big goal. I was actually so nervous the whole week before the book launch. I thought I was going to throw up all day, every day. Like, couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep. I was like, all these people are going to read my words. And like, what if the recipes don't work? And like, I was so nervous. And then I've just gotten such a good response from it. And I actually just got word from my publishing company that we are like literally almost completely sold out of books in the UK, Canada, United States, and Australia.
Wow.
So cool.
I'm so like, It's so great, but I'm also kind of stressed because the holidays are coming up. I think there's like 70 books left. I'm like, but wait.
This is like the hot season for that.
Yeah, I know. So yeah, it's pretty amazing. It's crazy when you just like commit and you're like, I'm going for this. And like, I'm not letting anything get in my way, like budget, people telling me no. I mean, the day, like 2 weeks before the book launch party, my books got lost on a shipping container in the middle of the ocean.
Holy shit.
And I was like, cool, let's just like throw one more curveball into this situation. So
just when it starts to get generally predictable, that's when it has to happen.
I know, but
yeah. I'd love to, Bailey, talk a little bit about the internal journey that you experienced through this, because alone in itself to achieve what you did, that's not easy. But I'm going to celebrate you. And I know that it was an emotional process to actually get there. And a lot of the time that, we'll talk about creating the body or the energetic capacity to hold more in your life. And to me, that whole journey of 24 months of like head to the computer, making this happen, going through it all, like that was you expanding your emotional capacity to handle living as a best-selling author, to handle all these people seeing you. But through that process, there's a lot of shock that gets hit to the nervous system. A lot of like you said, not able to eat, not able to like do all these things like a normal human being. And so I'm curious, like, what was that process like? How did you go through the pressure and the stress and not let it completely like shut you down? How did you manage to hold all of that? And I'm sure there are times that you didn't, so maybe share about those times too. Yeah. But what was that experience like?
I mean, that's honestly such a great question. And I appreciate you asking that, because no one ever really asks questions like that. It was honestly like, it was tough, losing one of my best friends who I had made the choice to disconnect from because her addiction was just like kind of destroying me. Like I would have anxiety about her dying all the time when we were roommates. And, like hearing about the fact that she died, like right before I had to submit the book, I was just like, okay, I'm just going to put this like immense feeling. And it's not the first friend that I've lost to addiction either. For some reason in my life, I've had to go through this multiple times with very close people in my life. So I think it's just a lesson that I need to learn for some reason, or just something I need to work through. But I literally took this grief and I like put it into a box and I just like put it on the shelf. And I was like, I'm just going to deal with this later. Like I just like don't have any capacity to deal with that. And it's funny because throughout this whole process, it really, you question yourself, you question how good you are. You have imposter syndrome. I don't know, like I kept saying like, oh, I'm such a small fish in such a big ocean. And my husband would be like, stop fucking saying that. Like, you are not, you're such a big fish, like, but in my mind, it's like, you get trapped in these conversations that you have with yourself. And, over the course of everything that happened, it was like that grief that I put on the shelf was just like peeking its way. It was like, hello, like I'm still here. And a big part of my journey also that I wrote in the cookbook is I have endometriosis. So I've suffered with chronic pain for like 16 years, which is a big reason why I wrote the book in the first place. It's a big reason why I went vegan. I talk about it a lot on my social media platforms and in the cookbook. But because I was so stressed, like my chronic pain started creeping back too, because I wasn't taking care of my body, because I was so focused on work. And I felt like an imposter, because I was like, wow, I'm not healthy. I'm writing a book about healing people and like healing yourself. And I'm also like I was dealing with a bunch of family stuff. Like I said, my brother was living with us at the time. And there was just a lot going on that like internally, like I just wasn't okay. I would have many conversations with my husband being like, I just like don't feel like my mental health is doing well, but there's nothing I can really do. Like I didn't even have time to even, and I know looking back on it, it sounds ridiculous, but I didn't feel like I had time to even do therapy or like go to yoga. Like there's COVID also. So it was like, do I risk getting sick? But I have all this stuff going on. So I have all these people depending on me, my personal clients that I work with, I'm trying to help them heal. I was like so focused on everyone else. And I think once the book finally came out, and we had this amazing party and I felt all this love from all these people, I finally was able to just like exhale. And I just like felt all the feelings, I was able to really just like move I just felt like I was like a tight little wound up ball up until the book launch day. And then all of a sudden I was like, okay, it's out. Like, there's nothing I can do now. Like, it's all like, it is just, it is
surrender.
what it is. Surrender. And like halfway through, we also hired an assistant, which was scary for me at first because I hadn't had an employee. It was literally all just me. And then it was my husband. It was me for 10 years of my business. And then my husband.
Wow.
And then we hired an assistant, and she was like, I was like, why didn't I do this sooner? Like, what the hell is wrong with me? You know, she's
that's
been
a typical sentiment for sure.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. But I think to your point too, David, you know, I wanted this for my whole life, but I wasn't ready for it until it happened. And there's many things that have come up. Like I was just on a live cooking segment on WGN like last week on in Chicago. And that was always a big dream for me. And I was sitting there on the set and I was like, you know, like I've been through so much in the last couple of years and I've wanted this for my whole life. And I've always wondered, like in my early 20s, like why it didn't happen then. And I just realized that I wasn't ready. Like I wasn't ready then. I was ready now. Like I've been prepared now. Like I can hold this much energy, this much space. I know when I'm nervous or anxious or I have anxiety, like I know what to do with those feelings. And yeah, I just feel like I'm a completely different person than I was even a year ago when I submitted that manuscript. Like a whole different version of me is here and she's still in there, of course, but yeah, I've grown and I've expanded and yeah, it was tough. My mental health was really struggling. And of course, you wouldn't really be able to tell that on social. And I think people are trying to be like more honest on social media about their mental health, but saying like my mental health is struggling in front of like, 20,000 people on social media is like, can honestly sometimes make it worse because then you have anxiety about like being vulnerable on social media. And like, sometimes it's just like,
sure. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I don't know if I even answered your question, but I kind of rambled a little.
Yeah, this is amazing. It's great. There's so many different directions. I actually had a couple of reflections myself right off the beginning there. You said how, you've experienced multiple deaths and I love close friends and such. And you're saying how like maybe there's a lesson and so on. And one of the things that I've learned, and I've learned this especially from like Tony Robbins, is the idea that like we experience these extreme things such that we can empathize with people who have similar extreme scenarios.
Yeah.
Right. So it's not even necessarily just so you can have a lesson, but actually so that you can become someone who can truly relate to others. And then that's typically how people are able to make an even bigger impact because they can relate to even more people and see more of what other people can see. So in my mind, I think that that's probably hopefully what it's for. But nonetheless, condolences and power to you for making it through. The other thing that came up for me was how you're saying, during all that process, you're doing a healing book, but you're not even feeling healed and such. Oh, my babies are going to interrupt here. You girls want to say hi on the podcast? Say hi to Chef Bay. Here, I've got two. They're turning 2 in 2 weeks.
Oh my gosh. Hi.
Hello. Say hi.
They're so cute. Hi.
No, I need them to go. All right. All right. She's going to sit here for a little bit. Hopefully they won't cry. So what I was going to say is that you sort of had and this came up actually with another guest, which is the shoemaker's shoes. Right. It's like the shoemaker's shoes are always so rough and tough because he's so focused on bringing value to others that he forgets to take care of himself in the same thing that he does. And so I think that's that same world that you were in as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like, it's really interesting. And I think the thing with health too is I think we idolize certain people, especially online, who look like they're healthier, they fit into a box or whatever, but healing, the thing that I've learned the most, whether it's emotional or physical or whatever, it's not linear. It's such a journey and you're not always going to be on top of it. Like we live in a very high paced, very stressful world right now. And it's okay if you're like not always on your shit. You know what I mean? Like sometimes some things have to take a back seat so other things can exist. And that's like something I've really given myself grace for, is just allowing that time to be like what it was. And the second I got back from our book tour and our honeymoon, I decided, I was like, I'm doing at-home blood tests. Like, I don't know what's going on with my body. I should figure it out. But I just wasn't feeling good. My endo was creeping back. I was like bloated all the time. And like, lo and behold, I was like deficient on all these simple nutrients that I knew exactly how to fix. And within 1 week, I felt so much better. So I was like, I need to not be hard on myself and just understand that I have all these tools that I need to feel good and to like go after that when I need to. And I think that's important for anyone listening, especially going into the holiday season. You know, I did this poll on my Instagram where I was like, I asked people if they felt like their health was at risk over the holidays, and 70% of people said yes. And so it just goes to show that like you can make time for yourself, even little tiny things like little reminders to drink water or whatever. So it's, you know, ingrained in me to talk about people's health, but I just wanted to say that for people listening that like they're just make the time. Like, and I'm also telling myself too, I literally have a green juice, a matcha, a bowl of fruit. Like
I saw you switching back and forth. I was like, oh, that's matcha. Oh, that looks good.
I've got green juice. Yeah, I literally, and I have like a big water. Like I'm just like, even if I don't finish it all, it's like all here just in case I need it. You know, it's all about like setting yourself up. So yeah.
No, and what I love that you did, Bailey, is like you, after all of that, and this shows that you're embodied in your work. This shows that you're not an imposter, because after all of that stress, when it was finally published and you could take a step back, you were like, okay, now I need to remember that I need to check in at my own with my own health. I need to go through my own practices. I need to move through whatever emotions are coming through this so that I could heal and be healthy. And what did you find out? You found out, you know, that, hey, things were off. Okay, now you're asking yourself how you can get back on track. And I think that's so beautiful. And where I feel like so many entrepreneurs and high performers go wrong is they never do that. Right. They get off one hamster wheel and enter another hamster wheel, and then another one, and then another one, till eventually they have cancer, or eventually disease is manifesting in their body, or dis-ease is manifesting from their body from all the stress that they're experiencing. And so I'm curious, what are some of I'd love to get into some like practical, like what are some things that you do to bring yourself back on track, whether it be from a health perspective, a nervous system, like coming back to like an aligned center after you have just come from like a high cortisol, high stress experience?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I have so many things to say, of course. But it's funny that you say that, because I grew up, my mom is an entrepreneur. So she was like starting businesses. If it didn't work, she started another one. And like, she's just like a serial entrepreneur. And I grew up with my mom, like living in that kind of like stressed out spot. And, you know, she's so much different now. But when I was younger, she had young kids and she was like, I need to make this work. No matter what, I need to make this work. And so I always kind of reflect back to that, because I always want to be more mindful of just like my center and myself. And for me, like things that can help is to just like have compassion for yourself, I think is the first thing, because I think we are so hard on ourselves, especially as high performers, as entrepreneurs. We want to make the next best thing, make that next income bracket. We want to like, you know, we have all these goals, but it's like, you have to have compassion for yourself. And actually a group of people I would love to work with more is high performers, in being like, okay, like you're not going to be successful or retain that if you're not healthy, and if you're not like understanding the energetics of food in your body and all that stuff. But another thing is just having a baseline of ethics from what you're eating. Like, I think it's really easy to get caught up in like keto or paleo or like sugar-free or blah, blah, blah. But I think the reality is that if you have a baseline of ethics and what you're eating and why you're eating and the energetics of what you're eating, then what you're eating will never be such a internal discussion, right? Because it will always be true. Like for me, like when I went plant-based, my business took off because I was healthy and my ethics matched what I was talking about. And I think this runs true for anyone, whether they're talking about compassion coaching or being successful or changing the face of women, like whatever it is, we have to look at like every single thing we're doing in our lives. And if that matches up with the ethics that we're talking about within our businesses. And so, yeah, I think like for me, the plant-based movement just really aligned and fit, because it's like, I want to be compassionate to myself. I want my clients to heal. And in order to do that, we need to be thinking about more than just ourselves. We need to be thinking about the world around us. And I think when we create compassion for ourselves, we then have capacity to have compassion for other people. And then we then have capacity to have compassion for animals and for the environment. And, you know, I think it's hard to care about animals if you don't care about yourself on that level. Like it's impossible. It truly is impossible. So yeah, ethics is a big one, having compassion for yourself. And then the third one is just having like things that you just never not do. So for me, like I have a cold pressed green juice every single freaking day. Like even if I can't make it, I go somewhere if I'm traveling and I find it, like I need to have a green juice. And just like, I mean, you guys probably have your things that you do every day. Like I have my big water bottle. Like they're super simple things, but they're things that just really, really help and can kind of bring you back down to earth. And I think the final thing would just be like asking for help when you need it. Because I think a lot of us
big one there.
Want to ask for help. And for me, like, for instance, like when I got back from the book tour, I had all these feelings happening. And I was like, I just need to get blood work done. And I found this great, it's called Base. It's a brand new app, not sponsored, by the way. But yeah, basically they'll send a at-home testing kit to you. You talk about what you're going through and they'll test your hormones. They'll test all your different levels. And then basically on the app, they'll tell you like, okay, this is what's going wrong and this is how you can fix it. And then you retest the next month. You don't have to go to a doctor's office. You don't have to pay for a naturopath. Like it literally just shows up at your house. It's like 200 bucks. It's so cool. And so for me, that was me asking for help because I was like, I need something else other than what I'm doing. So yeah, asking for help can mean so many other things. It could be hiring someone like me. It could be hiring a coach. It could be going to see your doctor, getting a checkup. But I think we all try to do everything all by ourselves all the time. And we can work so much better if we have a team around us, if we have a health team, if we have a business team. I think people need people. And I think it's important to remember that.
Love it. So let's recap them. So I'm not
even what did I just say?
No, I'm not remembering them. Let's go backwards. So last one was
the first one was ethics. So baseline of ethics for yourself.
The first one was compassion, actually.
Compassion,
which
compassion
was
for yourself.
Yes.
Yeah. We're all like, wait, what just happened?
Oliver's like,
so much good stuff.
Has got this, bro.
No, I'm just like, it's okay. It's recorded, everybody. Just go back.
Literally, I know. Yeah, go back, read.
No, but I'll just share what resonated hard for me, and then you can do whatever resonates for you. But like for me, again, I love that compassion was the first one because I think that speaks so much to, and you kind of alluded to it. You said, hey, you know what? On social media, people are starting to be more authentic. Key word though, starting. Mm-hmm. Like it's still very much not, right? Yeah. And that's where there's a lot of this imposter syndrome, self-hate talk and narrative and inner dialogue and all that kind of stuff. And so I think that's such a powerful point. Like have some compassion. And then of course you took it even further when saying like, look, if you have compassion for yourself, you can have compassion for others, which means you can have compassion for animals, the planet, and all the things. And it's almost one of those things that's like so obvious when you hear it, but then you're like, but I'm not really realizing that. Mm-hmm. So it's great to sort of have that reaffirmed. But to me, that was like one of the big ones that definitely stood out. David, I don't know if you had a different reflection.
No, I would agree. I mean, just the asking for support. I mean, Bailey, your journey is a huge reflection of like your husband coming in to support you in the business, and then you getting an assistant, and then like allowing yourself to receive support from other people, and then how that led you to blowing up because we're social beings. Like we can't do this on our own. And so many of us are trying to isolate ourselves away from the rest of the world and just feeling like, okay, I'm on my own journey. I need to put my head down and not talk to anyone and be isolated. But that isolation is not only costing you your mental health, but it's costing you your success because success is easier when we're surrounded by people that can have our back. So I love that you shared that.
Oh, it's so true. Like the first month where the business was, cause like, my husband and I were paying, like we're splitting bills cause he had his job. I had my job or my business, whatever. And then like the first month that the business was paying for like all the bills, I was like, fuck, we're actually doing this, or like the first month that we got our assistant and I was paying her. But the reality is that you're able to expand. Like I did my business by myself for almost a decade and it was hard. Like I was private chefing full time. I was doing retreats. I was consulting and I was doing everything by myself. And when my husband and I first sat down to work together, he was like, you need to write down every single thing that you do in a week. And I was literally like page after page after page. And he was like, what the fuck? Like you're doing all this stuff.
Amazing.
Like you're psychotic. Like, I don't even know how this is possible. So, and it was a moment for me where I was like, why am I doing all of this stuff? Like, this is crazy. Like I'm the accountant, the marketer, like I'm literally doing everything. And So yeah, it was giving me a chance to expand. We just recently like gave our assistant a raise and like bumped up her hours, and like that she's like, I'm so happy to pay her every month. I'm like, yes, here, take my money. Like, let's go. Like, let's do this together. So yeah, we really can't do this alone. And I think it's really easy to feel like you want to hold on to the money that you're making. Like you want to like keep it and hold it. But the thing that I've learned the most is that you have to let it flow through you. It's not yours. It's a currency. It's an energy. That's all it is. It just flows in and it flows out. And the more you let it flow out, the more it's going to flow in. And like, that's what I've learned the most, because I was not raised like that. I was raised very differently. And it's been nice to be able to unlearn all this stuff and be like, you know what? Like, this doesn't even belong to me. You know, when I've worked as a chef, working hours for money, working 16-hour days, like working in restaurants, working for, you know, big private clients, it's all like hours for money. Like I worked this many hours, so I made this much money, and this is my money because I earned it. Instead of thinking of it as just being like a flow, you know? And I think the more we can look at it as a flow, and the more we can invest our money into other people, the more we'll realize that we have more expansion than we like ever thought possible.
So good. I love getting into the conversation of the flow of money and how it really is that you want to try to almost become a channel for money to flow through. Yes. It's just that simple. And what's funny is an analogy actually just came to mind for me. I think so I'm in Costa Rica right now. I actually moved to Costa Rica as of October 27th indefinitely.
Amazing. Okay.
I know it's been quite a wild adventure for sure. So and just like you, right? On the front end, it definitely looks like a lot of good stuff. Back end, there's a lot of chaos. I can tell you that.
Totally.
But
yeah.
One of the things that I've noticed while shoveling sand out with my twin girls, because that's very fun for them, is when you go to some spots, if the water is leveled with that part of the sand and you start digging a hole, the water starts to come up. And what happens, so that sort of hole becomes a channel for water. And then what's interesting is as you let it be, you don't have to do anything, the water slowly shreds the sand walls and it actually makes the hole bigger. What's my point? And this all just came to me now, so it might be really stupid. But my point is that just like the water and the hole in the sand, the more you let the water flow, the more you let the money flow in, the more the money itself will actually expand that hole and make it even larger so that even more can come through. And then there's this pool where my two babies are able to jump in and make like laughs and stuff. It's adorable. So I want to create a baby pool of money.
A baby pool of money. Oh my God. That's so funny. And I also want to like highlight the entrepreneurial struggle of the first couple of years. Cause like, that shit's hard and you feel like you're alone and it's isolating and you're just like putting yourself out there and some of your friends support you and some of your friends won't. And it's just like, it's so challenging. So I understand that idea of wanting to like keep all of this, you know, all of this here, but the more that you're in it, the more you realize you have to just let go and just kind of just like let it all flow. So yeah, if you are in your first couple of years of business, just keep going. Like it gets better.
Can we hear a little bit more about your first couple of years? I mean, I heard you say you were doing 18-hour days in restaurants and you were cooking, and then I'm sure there was this like breakthrough transition period where you decided, you know what, I'm going to do this for myself. And that's a really scary thing. And I'm sure it wasn't easy at first, but like, can you talk to us about that transition from like loving cooking as like this passion of yours to being like, you know what, I'm going to do this and work for myself?
Yeah. I mean, like I said, my mom was not a serial entrepreneur. So and so it's interesting. My dad has had the same. So my dad builds satellites for the government. So my dad is like, he's had the same job for 40 years. He's a badass. He like knows all the top secret things. And then there's my mom, who's a serial entrepreneur, who's super just like gypsy woman. Like she just does what she wants. And it's great. So I've had like
these awesome duo.
Yeah. So I've got like mad work ethic from my dad and also like the idea of freedom from my mom, where those two were just like so important to me. I mean, I got my first job in a kitchen when I was 11. Instead of going to summer camp, I was just like super down to make pastries and cannolis and cakes and stuff at this pastry shop. And I was like, this is so much fun. And then I went to culinary school straight out of high school. So I moved from Colorado to San Francisco to go to Le Cordon Bleu. Never lived in a big city. I was like a country girl. And I literally moved downtown into a hostel, like knew nobody.
Wow. That's a big shift.
And Cordon Bleu is not, it's an expensive school to get in.
$100,000, baby. Like And that's before like all the interest and stuff. I'm still paying that thing down. But yeah, I mean, I probably will be forever because you never pay off the interest, but whatever. But yeah, so what was I talking about? I just got caught up in loans for a second. They really just like take over sometimes. But yeah,
Cordon Bleu moved out there living in a hostel.
The Cordon Bleu. Yeah. So I was in the Cordon Bleu and at the same time was working full time. And so basically, because culinary school is kind of interesting. It's like you have one class for 6 weeks and you take the class for 6 to 8 hours a day.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So,
and it's focused on like one culinary topic kind of thing.
So, well, you start on like foundations 1, which is basically like knife skills, and you learn how to make things like mayonnaise, cool. and you're doing this all day, every day for 6 weeks. And then you graduate from foundations 1 and you go to foundations 2, and then you go to foundations 3, which is basically like, it's basically like chopped every day. You just get like torn apart by your chefs, and they like spit your food on the ground. And like, at least my chef literally hated me, where it was like, yeah, it was really easy to fail foundations 3. Like if you weren't like on it. So yeah, like every single time was that. And basically through that time I was doing like stages at restaurants, and I just hated it. Like, honestly, I was just like, as a blonde woman, I would get little comments like, "Oh, honey, pastries upstairs, you're on the wrong floor," or like sexual harassment from chefs, or like I'd go to stage in restaurants or like I'd be working like in restaurants trying to figure it out while I was in culinary school, which lasted for like 2.5 years. And I'd be like line cooks trying to grab my butt, or like, they'd put me in this one corner so they could just like graze by me as I'm like, it was just like little things like that where I was like, I just like don't have it in me to deal with this forever. Like, I'm just like, because that's what it is. You go to culinary school and then you go and work your way up in the restaurant. So halfway through culinary school, I decided that I was going to like try to be a private chef. And I had this one woman who was like an admin in the school. And she's like, "I got you a private chef gig. Don't tell anyone though, because they like don't support that here, because they like really didn't. They wanted you to like, it's an ego
go the typical route kind of thing."
I always say that like the restaurant industry is full of bruised male egos, and it's like very hard for them to see like people doing things differently. And I don't think that about everybody, but yeah, it's definitely
it's fair to say that there's a general narrative in any industry. And so if that's the one here, which is a pretty common narrative in most industries.
Totally. I mean, in the world, let's be real.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah. So then I got my first private chef job, and it was honestly a disaster. I literally like set a piece of salmon on fire. I like forgot to put the lid on a blender.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
And I'm on like the penthouse of the Millennium Tower. So you're like looking over the Bay Bridge. And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And they come home and like dinner is literally like a shit show. And I was like, I'm crying. I'm like in tears. And they're like, "Oh, honey, like, it's okay. We'll order out." They paid me anyway, sent me home in their private car, and then invited me to come back the next day. So,
wow.
Big shout out to whoever that is.
Yeah. Abundance mindset.
Yeah, they were, well, like, I was honestly like so innocent too. I was like 19. I had no idea what the fuck I was doing. And they were like, they just gave me a second chance. And so I actually ended up working for them for like 2 years. And it was great. Yeah, it was nice because I was able to like do that work, and I still worked restaurant part-time. I like dabbled in bartending. I did like pastry. I just kind of was like, I wanted to just get an experience to work all over the restaurant industry and all over, just like, I just wanted to, I even did my externship at a juice cleansing company, like per my parents' dismay. They like hated me for it. They were like, "This is a joke. Like, what are you doing? You're spending all this money." But now, I mean, it paid off. I'm drinking juice every day. But yeah, so I just like did whatever I could. And then, unfortunately, my chronic pain just got really bad though. So I ended up I didn't cook for 2 years. So I kind of like had this whole thing happen. I like got all these clients as a private chef. And then I just had such debilitating chronic pain, and there was no options then for women with endometriosis. It's like pain. I was on opiates. I was just trying to survive really. So I just started bartending, and I didn't cook for 2 years. Eventually I ended up moving home with my mom, my dad, and I basically with my tail between my legs after living in San Francisco for 6 years, and was just like, I need help. I'm like so sick. I can't. I can't function. And that's kind of when I decided to change my whole mindset around food. I mean, it's really interesting that I paid $100,000 to learn about food and I didn't really learn about food at all. And so I learned about the food industry. I learned about pesticides, and that's really where I got really interested at first, was like the chemical aspect of food, how much our food is sprayed with crap, like how much, animals who are raised for food are just injected with so many vaccines and antibiotics, and they're eating all of this sprayed food, and like most of them have cancer and everyone's eating cancer. And it's just like, I started seeing this big thing and I was like, this is terrifying. Why is everyone asleep to this? Why have I been asleep to this? Of course I'm sick. What the fuck? I was just like, what is going on? So I basically turned my business into, and this was way before I went vegan, into just helping people who have really intense food allergies. So when I was in Colorado, I started doing that. And I don't know, like, I always just wanted to do something differently. And when I started working for people with food allergies, I was like, wow, I'm actually making a difference. It became so much less about me and my business. And it became more about like, I couldn't wait to see my clients. I couldn't wait to like make something new for them. And while I was healing other people, I was really able to heal myself. So that's kind of like, and then I ended up moving to San Diego and the rest is kind of history. But yeah, it was just kind of like, it was not so much about me. It was more about like my massive, like, shock for the food industry, where I was like, okay, I can get back into this, but I'm going to not cook for super rich people, and I'm going to cook for everyday people, and I'm going to help them heal. And now it's been, I think like 7 years since that. And now look at us go.
Very cool. I love the roller coaster of it. Right. Again, it's just that coming back to that narrative of like, it's so easy to look at where you are. I mean, you look at your Instagram, it's gorgeous. You have a gorgeous Instagram, for the record. And it's like so easy to see that and be like, oh, she's just got to figure it out. But it's really good to see that it was never that simple. One of the things that really came out to me that I'd love to hear more about is you started talking about, again, like discovering that everyone, and you basically said everyone's eating cancer. For what comes up for me is, without, I guess, going too much in, well, actually, I'd love to hear wherever you go with it in terms of gruesome details, but more specifically, like, how can we avoid that? How can we not eat cancer?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, what a question. The thing I think I can say that will resonate the most is you just have to look at food as a transfer of energy. So also being educated about food is really important. But once I started thinking food as a transfer of energy, like, I'm a yogi, so I've been doing yoga since I was 15, like religiously. I've always been doing that. It's all about energy. It's all about breathing. It's all about like taking a good energy. And when you're eating, especially like if you look at it from the meat perspective, meat and dairy, when you're eating something that was petrified its entire life, that was probably ill its entire life, that watched its brothers and sisters and mother and everyone that they love get tortured and slaughtered, and you're eating that, like, you're eating that anxiety, you're eating all of that. Even with dairy, like dairy is one of the, and I actually, this podcast episode I have coming out on Thursday, Dr. Clappers talks all about dairy, like blew my mind, but it's just like one of the most treacherous, horrible industries, and you're eating that energy. And we're looking at a society that just has like so much anxiety, so much mental health issues. And no one's thinking about like where this food is coming from, because everything holds energy. Like this pen holds energy. I'm holding energy. Like this conversation is holding energy. And so when we can really think about this food as a transfer of energy, what cancer is just energy multiplying in a certain way, right? If you can think about it like that simply. And so for me, it was just so profound to think of it in that way and be like, oh my God, like, of course I have anxiety. Of course I have cysts that are rupturing. Of course I'm dealing with infertility, because especially like with dairy, like I'm like literally supporting an industry that it's like, I always say that like dairy is like the war on the feminine, because what they do is they like they rape cows, right? And I won't get too gruesome, of course, but like then they like, do it to get them pregnant so that they make milk. And then they take their babies, which is what the milk is for. Like they're pregnant for 9 months, just like we are. So they feel their baby, like they have such an emotional connection to them. And then they take the baby, and then the baby either gets slaughtered for veal or raised to be another dairy cow. And then after 5 years of doing this over and over and over and over and over again, the cow, like, just collapses, and then it gets sent to slaughter. So it's like, that is a war on the feminine. And this dairy itself is pumped full of estrogen because all cows are genetically modified now, which causes like Parkinson's, prostate cancer, breast cancer, endometriosis, like hypothyroidism, like everything, like autoimmune diseases. And no one's fucking talking about it. And it's just kind of like, I think I went off on a tangent, but your initial question is like,
perfect.
how can we happy to go on a tangent?
Yeah, trust me. Like there's so many parts of me that are getting so angry that this is, and I know this stuff, and then just hearing it, I'm just so angry. Like that's my response. Some people is like sadness, this, that, the other. Mine is
I get very angry. Yeah. And that's why there's a lot of angry vegans out there, because what's happening is really unjust, and it's really frustrating to have people defending the industries. But I think the thing that we can do is like educate and educate and educate and educate, inform and explain. Don't blame and shame people. And you have to realize that there's billions of dollars lobbied in the dairy industry, in the meat industries. Like it's subsidized by the government. Like it's cheaper to buy cheese than it is to buy nuts for a reason, because it's subsidized. So like, yeah, I mean, and when it comes to cancer, like I just found out 2 of my really good girlfriends, like their parents have cancer. Like I just found that out. And it's just so sad to think about how many people are suffering. And there's something that we can do, like there is something that we can do. So I think the first thing to think is just think about the transfer of energy of food and like what kind of energy you want to have in your body. And like that can put you on a really good path to like something new.
Yeah, I'd really be curious, Bailey. I loved all of that. And like, thank you so much for just informing and explaining your experience, because I feel like so many people are just unaware of what's happening in the industry. Is like, even like I've watched a lot of documentaries and the stuff, but even hearing of what you're talking about, the feminine and cows and how they live, like I didn't even know some of that. And so it's really cool to just hear you informing this. And I am curious, like what do you feel and think about the whole industry that's starting right now around like animals and regenerative farming or grass-fed meat and things like that? Like, do you feel like there's still in that an energy that is like not supportive, or do you feel like that can be supportive? I'm curious if you feel like it's all animal farming that isn't supportive, or what your thoughts are on that.
I love that you asked this question, because I love talking about this topic. I have a couple things to say. So you first said regenerative farming. So I think we can have regenerative farming without using animals for product. So I think we can let them graze, let them live. Like they're sentient, beautiful beings that feel things. And like, I mean, no animal wants to die, right? No animal wants to be killed against their will, of course. And so if we can use them to, and I don't like that word either, I don't like use them, but if we can like work with them to have them help
create an ecosystem,
right? Create an ecosystem, help them regenerate our soil. And I actually like kind of got into it with someone on TikTok, of course, on TikTok, about this, who was talking about, she's like, she posted this thing and she's has this regenerative farm and she has all these animals that she's super attached to, but then she slaughters all these animals for meat. And she's like, vegans, just hear me out. Like we're regenerating the soil. It's the life cycle. Animals have to die. And I don't like the idea that we as human beings feel like we need to play God, and it's our responsibility to be the life cycle. And we're going to decide when this animal lives and dies. And I just like, it's inhumane to kill anything against their will, whether it's a human being or a cow or a sheep, or like, it's just inhumane. And I don't know. And any animal, when they're about to die against their will, their entire body seizes up, whether they were grown on a pasture or they were, raised in a land lot, like smashed full of other animals just like them. And I don't know. The reality is there's only a few slaughterhouses in the entire US. So like, no matter where the animal came from, they all go to the same place, unless you have like a very small specific thing. And then the other
farm
thing,
to table kind of thing.
Exactly. And then the other thing that you said was grass fed. So that's a really funny term, because grass fed could mean anything. All it means is that they're eating grass. So they could eat grass that's been cut and given to them in in a bin, like it doesn't mean that they're grazing. And a lot of these terms that the meat industry uses are just labels. Like
it's just marketing again. Marketing, make it look sexy.
Much. Exactly. So it's really up to everyone's own ethical standpoint. Like I have people that will argue with me and be like, well, I hunt my meat. And I'm like, look, if you can go up to an animal and take its own life and skin it and do that whole thing, then literally nothing I can say will make you feel any differently. That's all you. But I think that we live in a time where we have so many options for food. We have so many options. It's amazing. And if you really look at how many people there are, how many calories it takes to feed all these 7+ billion people, regenerative farming will never work. I think the statistic is you need 6 planet Earths to have regenerative farming for the amount of demand that there is for meat.
Wow.
So
interesting.
Yeah. We've literally turned the earth into a giant farm. I mean, if you think about it, 60% of all grain that is grown goes to feed livestock. 60%. So if you look at all that water, all that land, and then there's all the land that livestock's on, it's just not, it's not regenerative. Nothing about it is regenerative. It's such it's just, the system is just who thought of this shit? You know what I mean? I think with the agricultural revolution, they never really thought that we would get to be this big of a population. Right. So now we're backtracking.
Exactly right. And I feel at first it was a lot of, we need to make a certain amount of money. How can we just maximize on the amount of money made with the smallest amount of space while keeping alive?
Exactly.
And then
which made sense on a micro level.
Right.
But on a macro level, now we get into freaking injecting all this shit into these animals and it's horrifying. So I feel whoever thought of it definitely was not thinking of what would happen if you continued the same game of profit over life for the next century.
Look at all big industries though. Profit over life is such a thing. When you look at the alcohol industry, the tobacco industry, the food industry, it's just the holidays. Look at Thanksgiving, for God's sakes. Look at how many turkeys are slaughtered for Thanksgiving, how much food waste happens during the holidays, how much trash is accumulated. It's always profit over life. And I think the sooner people start realizing that they have so much say in the money that they spend, for instance, the amount of people that have switched to non-dairy products has made the dairy industry literally so scared to the fact that they sued Miyoko's. Have you guys heard of Miyoko's dairy?
No, I'm actually one of those many people that switched too. So I'm very curious where you're going with this.
Okay. So Miyoko's, I hope I'm saying it right. She's amazing. She started with this vegan cheese book, and then she became this amazing vegan dairy maker. And now she has the best vegan butter, the best vegan mozzarella. She's killing the game. She's all over the country. And the dairy industry sued her for using the word butter on her product. And you want to know who won in court? She won in court because the dairy industry does not own the fucking word butter. But that just goes to show how afraid they are that people are actually waking up and realizing that this is not an ethical industry, A, and B, this is destroying our fucking planet. And the younger generations are tired of it. They're just so over this abuse of our environment that it's just things are changing. And I mean, I get really upset sometimes because I'm is anything ever going to change? But things are really changing. And I think we can have a lot of hope in knowing that things are going to get better.
Totally.
Amen to that.
Amen. Aho. Bailey, before we finish here, and hopefully this won't open up a giant tangent, because I feel we could potentially have a 30-minute conversation on the question I'm about to ask you. Sure. But hopefully we could bring it into 2 or 3 minutes.
I love it. Yeah. Okay.
I want to reel us back into the conversation around high performers and stress, but also bring it in how it relates to food, because specifically for the feminine, I've noticed so many female entrepreneurs and female high performers that when stress manifests and they're not eating properly, like you mentioned, all of those sicknesses and disease that can happen. and manifest in your body. And I've seen that with my fiance, where, you know, if she's in a place of stress, like she just developed a cyst, and from that place of stress, and she used to have a lot of body problems from the food that she was eating. And so I would love to ask you, like, for men or women, but I know this is really prevalent for a lot of women, and maybe you know why. I don't know why it seems to manifest more with women than men, but you know, and you're in a place of stress to the point where disease is manifesting in your body, and you want to heal that. You want to move through it using food, using the food you consume on a day-to-day basis. What would you recommend to start on that healing path to move through the stress, but also the manifestation of that stress and disease?
Totally. So you have to think about, like, when you eat, your body's working very hard to do whatever you're going to do with that food. So if you're eating food like highly processed food, lots of dairy, meat can take up to 7 days to process in your body. So if you're eating all this food that's really hard on your digestion, you're causing stress within your body. Right. Just by what you're eating. So if you're in a very stressful situation with work, if you're in a stressful situation with your relationship, or you're going through like a chronic illness, which can be very stressful, like going through a constant pain cycle just causes so much stress and exhaustion on the body. If on top of that, you're eating something that's causing more stress, then you're just basically on a hamster wheel of stress. So if you're able to eat, so basically high fiber diets and eating the rainbow is always something that I suggest, because you just want to give your digestive system a little break. You want to have things easily move through you. Eating the rainbow, you want to make sure you get
not Skittles though.
Not Skittles. Yeah. Thank you. But yeah, like every single day, you want to get every color of the rainbow. You want to get as many greens as you can possibly get in, and to just eat as plant-based as possible. And I'm sure there's plenty of people listening to this podcast that are not plant-based that are like, whoa, what just happened on this episode? But I think the best place to start is to just eat as many whole plants as you possibly can every single day. And if you are eating meat, to look at it as a condiment instead of your main source of calories, and to go from there.
Interesting word to use, condiment instead. I like that.
Yeah, because meat is such a calorie dense food. So we get very full on a piece of meat, and then we have 3 pieces of broccoli, and that's it. That's like the standard American way of doing it. And instead, we want to think of how can we fill our plate with plants. And if you still really want to have that meat, then how can you do it in a very minor, minimal way? And then that way you're spending way less money too on everything. Yep. But yeah, it's really just like taking care of the self and taking care of your body, so that when you do go through stress, your body has a better availability to deal with it. And I think it's harder for women because, I mean, women have to work through menstrual cycles. And like, I think that all women should have a week off a month where they just get to like rest. Because if you think about how many calories you burn, how much stress your body goes through, like, especially if you're dealing with something like me with endometriosis or PCOS or whatever, that is stressful. There's a lot to do. Like if you have cramps and you're trying to talk to your boss, like it's the worst thing ever, So like, with that said, like you should really just work on trying to de-stress from the inside out. And then that way you can handle the stress that's inevitably going to happen living in the modern world that we live in 2021, because it's nuts out here.
Yeah, I think we just found the title of our podcast, by the way, De-Stress from the Inside Out. That's pretty powerful.
Inside out. Yeah, I love that. I know. And I did want to say too, before we wrap up, like this is called Beyond the Peak, this podcast. And it's something that I didn't mention. Like when I first wrote the book, I was like, now what? I was actually really depressed. When the book came out, we were done with like everything. I was super depressed. I was like, wow, I've done this huge thing. And like, where do I go from here? And I think the biggest lesson from that is just knowing that you've already set yourself up. You've reached the peak for a reason, so that you can just kind of like coast a little bit. Like it's okay to just like wait and see what happens. And I think that's one of the biggest lessons that I've learned, is because, I mean, reaching the peak is like a big dopamine hit, right?
Yep. For sure.
So eventually you got to come down from that. And I think it's just really trusting the process that you're on the right path.
I love that. So much good stuff there. And I definitely think this is a great time to come sort of to a close here. So yeah, I mean, for you and your organization or your business. But actually, what's your business name? I didn't even. Is it just Chef Bay?
It's Chef Bay. Yeah, keeping
Okay,
it simple.
cool. Okay. So that's totally fair. So what's next for Chef Bay? And maybe, like you said, maybe you're just coasting. But is there something else that's coming out that or that the universe is calling you into?
Yeah. What's next for us? I don't know. We've got a lot going on. We do corporate wellness classes. We have our membership, which I'll talk about in a second before we get off. So we do like weekly cooking classes for our membership for people all over the world. It's really fun.
Cool.
But I don't know. I'm turning 30 in February and I want to do something different. So I don't really know what that looks like yet. But I'm just kind of like riding the holiday wave because the holidays are always super crazy for us. The beginning of the year is crazy for us because everyone's like wants to go vegan and like everyone wants to do all their things. But yeah, that's for once, I just don't know what's next. And it's kind of nice to just, and I think there's beauty in that because I was not expecting to get a book deal. I was not expecting any of this stuff and it just kind of happened. And so instead of like trying to have it like, again, that tight grip on control, I'm just gonna just like ride it out and like ride the wave and like go into my 30s feeling super accomplished for what I accomplished in my 20s and like I don't know, just like flow into it. And yeah, I just not have so much control. I think it's more of like a personal mindset shift. That's what's next for me. And just enjoying being married. Like it's pretty great. So yeah.
That's awesome. It's definitely important. And I love that. I love that sort of that energy that you're going into your 30s with. I think that's going to really serve you going into it because of course there's so many people that go into their 30s and they'll be like stressed. you know?
Yeah. Well, I'm kind of like the whole 30 number. I'm like, wait, what's happening? You know what I mean? But no, I feel very grateful to just be alive. Like I said, I've experienced a lot of loss in my life. And I think every day that you get to wake up and you can breathe and you feel your heartbeat and you're surrounded by people you love or you have a pet that you love, I think there's just so much gratitude and just being alive. And I think getting older is such a privilege that not everybody gets to do. So I'm just grateful. Yeah.
Cool. And then where's the best place people can find you? I mentioned your Instagram, but feel free to re-mention it and then just anywhere else.
And we'll link everything in the
okay.
Of course.
Yeah, totally. So on my Instagram at chef_bay, same thing with TikTok. I'm like loving TikTok right now. I'm like posting all the wild things on TikTok. I'm just experimenting. It's kind of fun. But I also have an online membership, like I just mentioned. It's called Cook 5 Heal. And we have like nutrition trainings on there and just all sorts of amazing things. We cook together weekly. We do hour-long plant-based classes. So if you're interested in just like learning more about plant-based food, or you just like want to have fun and cook with me virtually, it's really fun. And right now, as long as books last, actually, I'm sending out a free signed copy of my cookbook, Cook, Heal, Go Vegan, to anyone that signs up. So hop on that. And we're actually doing an amazing Black Friday sale coming up. Actually, this is probably going to come out after Black Friday, but check the website and see what kind of things that we have going on. But yeah, that's pretty much where to find me. And that's where you can work with me directly and ask questions. And I also do one-on-one coaching. So if anything resonated and anyone wants to work with me specifically, you're working through something, or you really want to eat more plant-focused or heal in more ways than one, I have a couple coaching spots opening for 2022. So yeah, that's it.
Very cool. And then we do this with all our guests. What's just sort of, if any, it could just be breathe. But what's sort of a final thought that you'd love to leave with our audience?
Just like you got this, like we're living in a very weird time and there's a lot of opinions and a lot of pressure, but I heard someone say this like a few weeks ago, just instead of acting out of pressure, act just out of responsibility, responsibility for yourself, for the world around you. And, change is coming, change is happening, and you can be a part of that change if you want to. So, yeah.
Amazing. Well, Bailey, thank you so much for being on the podcast and for sharing your whole story and the ups and the downs and being willing to talk about the challenges. So many people don't share those things. And
it was a lot.
It was really fun. It was a lot and a lot of lessons.
A lot of passion.
So thank you so much for sharing your whole journey with us and with our audience.
Thanks, guys.
You're so welcome.